Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the 1992 hockey card designs. For hockey, they only have 9 main card sets, except for one minor little detail, which is the fact that actually they have 10 designs, because for Score they did 2 releases, one in the US and one for Canada, as they'd been doing, but unlike in the previous year where they just did a different color, in 1992 they actually had a whole nother design. So that is actually a 9th design to look at. And so in terms of looking at these, we're talking about Score. Why don't we start off with that Canadian release of Score? Because no, this is, unfortunately, this is a very bland card. That's the problem that the card has, is that there's nothing about the card that stands out, that is distinctive. You want for a card, especially a base brand card, to catch your eye, to pull you in, to earn your keep, earn your attention. And this card just doesn't do that. Now, I do like the idea of the color around the outside. It's a color that if you design a really formal, nice card, you can make it work. The problem is, it's not a formal, nice card. It just doesn't have anything that carries on its own to make the card distinctive. And so the color on the outside, it inhibits rather than enunciates the card. So this is a card, that is the cardinal sin. This is a card you're never going to notice. You're just not going to notice it. It's too busy, too many things are going on, and at the same time it's not doing anything at all. So just not good. And then taking a step up, but not a big step up, we get to O-Pee-Chee. So for O-Pee-Chee, they were now breaking away from Topps and saying, okay, we're doing our thing. So great, awesome. I'm glad they're doing that. The problem with this card is that in doing their own thing, they didn't do anything. That's really the issue here. This is a card that has a stripe down one side, which I'm rarely ever a fan of, and then they have a floating banner down below, and they don't have a border. That's the problem, but it's not borderless. It's a white border around the outside. The strip down the side is supposed to be what carries your eye. It's supposed to be the design element. The problem is, it's not very prominent at all. It's very subtle, and it needs to be able to make a statement. If it's not going to make a statement, it's got to be tethered to something that does make a statement, and it's not. The floating banner is even worse, because that box, it pulls your eye in and makes you look for something that is not there. Again, it's a white border. It's not even free floating. If it was free floating, then your eye would be pulled down to that floating box, and then you would notice the picture surrounding it, and the picture would run off. That's why it would catch your eye. Instead, it pulls you down, and then you notice that there's a little picture before a white border, and then everything just kind of deflates. The colors aren't even very good for the choice for these cards. So this is a card where you really do look at it and go, maybe Topps should have kept making the O-Pee-Chee cards like the Topps cards, because this is not good. It's not. Now, I do want to make one note about this card, though. Interestingly enough, in the next year, Score would use a similar design for their cards. They would have the color stripe down the side, but they had a very bold color. And the way that worked was that bold stripe down the side worked for the Score cards. Not great, but not bad. Actually not bad. This card, it tried to do something and it utterly failed. That works as a great segue to number 3 or number 7, however you want to look at it, Parkhurst. So in 1991, Pro Set made Platinum, which was supposed to be their fancy card, and it just was not. It really was not. So in 1992, for football, they made Power, and Power is actually a great card. It's everything Platinum was supposed to be. Well, for hockey, they decided to take the legendary Parkhurst name and use Parkhurst. So Parkhurst was the hockey higher end card set for Pro Set. The problem is that the very idea of Power was very simple, very clear, and very strong. Parkhurst, on the other hand, it's too much like the previous year. They basically made the same card as before, except they put a big marble stripe down one side. And that stripe is so powerful. It doesn't help that it's marble, so your eye actually thinks of it as a rock. Now, I'm okay with the colors of the veins in the marble. I think that's actually kind of cool. But the whole design of the card is that there isn't a design to the card. It's a big image, which is great, and then this big block which doesn't do anything, doesn't tie to anything. If they'd had a strip down one side on the opposite side to tie the two together, it might help. If they had just boxes at either corner on the opposite side, it might actually help. Those ideas would have at least pulled the card around and made a three-dimensional card, but they didn't. So instead, it's one side and the other, and it looks miscut, like the card next to it is creeping into this one. It shoves the image over to the side. It's too blocky. It's basically, the marble is kind of like a big punch to the face, and the card really can't recover from it. Even when the card is horizontal and the granite is at the bottom like a grounding element, it still just doesn't work. This was, at least they would have 1993 to improve it, and unfortunately they wouldn't. Here's where the real big problem is. So the card is designed to be really fancy, and it fails to work at a most functional level. But it can work at a functional level, because when we move on to Pro Set, you see that here, actually, that stripe down the side, that big block down the side, does work with a simple black to white fade. Now, the thing I got to note about this is that this happened right at the transition when Pro Set had to reinvent itself. So in football, Series 2 came out with pretty similar to this. And the football cards suck. They are just horrible. In hockey, it works. In hockey, it actually works really well. The color fade it's got kind of like a frosty quality to it. And that quality, the icing over kind of effect, works with the chilly nature of the shots, of the actual arena that they're in. And it also works well with the white color of the ice. Now, I may be reading too much into this, but from what I was seeing, the Parkhurst cards, those shots tended to seem kind of dark. The Pro Set cards seemed to have lighter colored images. And so the lighter colored images, if that is the case, actually do work with that border a lot better. So while the border is not great, it actually works for the Pro Set cards to the point where I think this is the best Pro Set design in hockey, which is pretty impressive considering how much I absolutely hate the football design of this same equivalent. So you can see the big stripe down the side. If you work with it, you can do something with it. So now when we move on to the middle of the road, we're going with Topps, just Topps. And here, this is a case very similar to football where the design actually kind of works. It's not the greatest card design in the world, but it does work pretty well. First off, Topps did have a tendency to choose portrait action shots for the images, which do a really good job of isolating the player so that you're focusing more on the player rather than the image. On top of that, the printing quality is actually pretty good on these cards, so the detail actually reads well. But the thing that really makes these cards work to me is the fact that the colors on the cards work well for the ambiance of the shots. It really helps that the color boxes down at the bottom tend to show up where the ice is located at, which makes the color boxes not get interfered with any of the ground elements that would normally show up on any of the other sets. In this one, it does tend to do a little bit better job of isolating, but the way that the whole card comes together for these cards, I think actually reads really strong. Is this better than football? I don't know, and thankfully I'm not going to have to decide that, because this card and the football card definitely don't show up on either the Ultimate Best of and Ultimate Worst of 1992 card designs lists. So that is a big relief. But it is a major step forward, and it'd be nice if they did a good card back, but look, baby steps. They're making progress, so Topps was taking its time getting to making good modern cards. But we go back to Score, and here we're going with the US version of Score, and this actually shows you what they should have done with the Canadian release. The card itself is the whole point. It is a grand show. It locks your eyes and pulls it in. It's got kind of an ice effect on most of the card, and then it has these big 2 shots of color that work as a counterpoint, and those pull your eye in, lock you in, and then once you're in, you see the image and you pay attention to it. That's what a card design should do. If the image isn't going to carry you, You've got to have a card that does the heavy lifting for you, and that's exactly what this card does. It's not the best design in the world, but it is a fun design. That's the thing. It's energetic. And the combination of how they pulled all these pieces together shows you what Score was capable of. This obviously is a far cry from what they did in baseball in 1992. But for what they were trying to do in hockey, they actually pulled off a pretty good card for a base brand. So then for the next spot, I'm going to go to Stadium Club. And Stadium Club, the thing that makes Stadium Club work is the fact that it's all about the images, which is actually the thing that makes Stadium Club not work. In 1991, when they debuted Stadium Club, they did not have the printing quality down. And the problem that they had was that the images were supposed to read and they were supposed to be everything, and they were not. That was the problem. It was close to being something great, but it wasn't. But in 1992, they got that cleaned up. So when we got to the 1992 sets, all of a sudden, for both basketball and hockey, which are very, very busy images, the images were starting to read, and that's what carries on these cards. Now, these cards don't tend to be good portrait shots, so you kind of got to know, this is a Sergei Fedorov card. They really don't advertise the name, so you got to know. But the images really do pull you in and lock you in, and you have fun exploring these cards. But as much as I love the card fronts, because the images were actually working, and I think that all the detailing down at the bottom works really well in balance, it does have a Stadium Club card back, so the best thing I can say about the card back is that I really like the card front. Moving into the top three, though, I'm moving here to Pinnacle. And for Pinnacle and Stadium Club on the card fronts are pretty close. With Pinnacle, they have a really good design. It's not quite at the level of the previous year, and yet at the same time, it's actually kind of better. It's a combination of the two. It doesn't have the busyness of the 91 set. It's more refined, more clean, and that's what makes this card work so well. It is almost too perfect, and that's the only detraction, is the fact that the card almost gets a bit boring compared to the very vibrant and exciting quality of 1991. The card back, I think, is probably better for this year, but it's lacking something. And it's interesting to look at 91, 92, and 93 and see how they evolved, because each set had something better. In this case, it's just way too well refined, and I really like that quality about it. I do prefer the energy of 1991, but for 92, I mean, they were keeping right up there, right at the top. But fortunately for number 2, Ultra did not get released in either basketball or in hockey in 1991, thank heavens, because the cards didn't look right. But they saved it for 1992, which was an excellent year for Ultra. Not as good as 93, but they were finally pulling the pieces together. When they started off in 91, they had a problem with the image, not so much with the image quality as much as the image selection to the border. They didn't know how to make a card that was exciting and really looked great. So in 1992, they finally pulled that together, and they had images that tended to be better selected, except in football, which is a whole nother conversation. They had a really interesting design element on the card, a little bit of gold foil, great element, and they had very rich, strong colors. So they brought all those pieces together. Now the printing quality was getting better. It wasn't quite at the place that it needed to be, so the cards really are dynamic. They're rich. They pop off the cardboard. They don't have the staying power that I look at this card and want it to have. I want it to have a jewel box-like quality level that they just didn't quite do in Ultra. And the card backs are a little busy. But the one knock, the actual knock that I have, is the fact that the border element down at the bottom, I like what they were trying to do, but I think that the color didn't quite work. It does do an excellent job of highlighting the two color boxes on each card, but the color itself, it has kind of an anemic quality, and I wish they went more with some sort of a gray tone. I think that would have made this card look better. But still, it's not a big knock on a card that was almost where Ultra needed to be. And for 1992, this was a shockingly good card. So much so that it's kind of impressive to me that number 1 is actually Upper Deck. The Upper Deck card is a very simplistic card. The image selection is, these images do tend to be busier, I mean, every once in a while you get something like the Gretzky card that just looks really great because they were able to design the card entirely around, or design the image around the cards. But the cards themselves, they have all the right details on the front to just make the card a really fine level of interest. They have a very simple box down at the bottom with the player name, but then that box gets it basically turns into an echo of hockey pucks to a hockey puck over on the side that has really rich, kind of a 3D like effect with a great logo on it. And that whole element down at the bottom, it has the fun you want, it has the interest you want, it has the clean, precise elegance that you want. It has all those pieces together. Couple that with the really rich, heavy colors, the strength of the colors in the images. The card front just comes together in a way that no other card in 1992 did in hockey. I think it's really gorgeous, and it's kind of a nod to what they were about to do in 1993 in football and baseball, which were just excellent cards. But still, this card, while not perfect, it has all the right things that it needs in all the right places, and it doesn't matter that the card images don't tend to be quite at the level as some of the other sets, because the card itself, I think, pulls off at the highest level. So, that's my ranking of all the hockey cards of 1992. I'm going to be doing a worst of and a best of the entirety of 1992 card designs. So I'm going to be doing the worst of following this video, and then I'm going to be looking at the best of baseball and football, and then I'm going to do a best of everything. So those I'm going to be doing in the very near future. If you're following along, if you're checking this out sometime later, then just find where they're at. If you haven't subscribed yet, definitely do subscribe. Check out my other videos, and thank you very much for watching.